Good afternoon, students. My name is Yuna Kario, and I'm your tutor for the subject classroom management, classroom teaching and management for the students that are doing dppe, acpe, djpe, and besp. Okay, so this is contact sessions for your August exams. All right, so let's just talk about what this paper will consist of, what will be in the paper. The paper is out of 120 marks, and it will be a 2-hour 30 minutes paper. There are I don't think there are 3 questions in these questions. I think it's a mistake. Okay, nonetheless, let's just go through what will be in question 1. Question 1 is coming from unit 1, which is unit 1, as we know it, is discuss key features of effective teaching and learning. So under unit 1, you need to look at the meaning of the word paradigm. What is a paradigm? You also need to know the contrast between a teacher-centered and learner-centered approach based on orientation towards education. You know that there is a very huge distinction between teacher-centered and learner-centered education in your study guides, but on this case I want you to concentrate on the orientation towards education. And then we'll also look at the assessment used in education as a tool to achieve desired learning outcomes. So a discussion on how assessment is used differently in a teacher-centered approach and the learner-centered approach. Okay, right before I go into detail, let's go back to what is meant by a paradigm. So for the word paradigm, in your discussion, this will be a question worth 3 marks. You have to describe what is meant by the way by the term paradigm. So please discuss briefly. You need to discuss briefly what is meant by paradigm. So in your discussions, you should state issues like a paradigm is a complex set of beliefs about a phenomenon, in this case education. So in this case, these beliefs should be based on the learner-centered approach. Okay, so education consists of many categories, and each category has specific criteria which outline certain requirements or characteristics for a learner-centered approach. So that is what a paradigm should be. And then we have now the second point, which will be your question 1.2 under question 1, which is based on the orientation towards education. So please, here you have to make a distinction between teacher-centered approach and learner-centered approach, basing it on the orientation towards education. For instance, toward education, what do we talk about under teacher-centered approach? When we look at the orientation towards education under the teacher-centered approach, education is about transmitting knowledge. For example, under the teacher-centered approach, education is about transmitting knowledge. But if we look at the learner-centered approach, or the new paradigm of learning, we say when it talks about orientation towards education, it's not only about education is not only about transmitting knowledge, it's about developing the human potential of a learner. You develop a learner in his or her potential abilities, fully develop them, not only transmitting knowledge, you as a teacher having all the knowledge and giving it to the learner, but the aim here is actually to develop the whole human potential of a person. That's what we talk about under the topic of the learner-centered approach on the orientation towards education. So please make that distinction. It's only 6 marks, so the 3 differences here will earn you the 3 marks, provided that you discuss them fully. And then the last question under question 1 is the one that talks about assessment in education. So talk about assessment in terms of the teacher-centered approach and the learner-centered approach. Discuss how assessment is different in terms of the 2 approaches of learning and teaching. For example, what is the assessment? Teachers use the assessment system to grade learners, which means to determine what they know. That's what we mean by assessment. Okay, now under the learner-centered approach, teachers use assessment to diagnose learners' mastery level, which means to determine what they do know. under the the learner-centered approach, when we talk of assessment, we are not only deciding to know what learners do not know, but under the learner-centered approach, we are looking at assessment as a way in which to diagnose learners' mastery level, the level at which they've mastered the information, and then at the same time again, we are looking at what they know. But if you look at the learner-centered approach, when we look at assessment, it's a system in which we grade learners on what they do not know. That is just one example. You are supposed to look at all the other differences that you can look at, and it's also a question worth 6 marks. So only 6 marks there. The next question is based on Unit 2, which is question 2. Question 2 is the design and explain elements of learning sessions. This is part 1. Okay, so the first question here will be on the discussion on how independent learning strategies are used to achieve teaching learning outcomes. The use of examples in a discussion will yield more marks. Here we are talking about a question worth 10 marks. Of course, if you do use examples, it will get you more marks as it states in your slides. Under the discussion of the teaching strategy which can be used to achieve learning outcomes, let's look what is meant by independent learning focus. What we mean by the independent learning. Independent learning focuses on the creation of opportunities necessary for learners to become capable, self-directed learners. In this process, learners learn to make decisions regarding their own learning in conjunction with relevant others. So what we are looking here at, we are discussing actually how independent learning strategies are used to achieve teaching learning outcomes. We are looking at how independent learning is fostered by creating opportunities which encourage motivation, curiosity, and a positive self-concept. So please do make that discussion. It's a 10-mark discussion. Prepare well in this aspect of the question paper, and then please do use examples where necessary. And then the second question here, it's on the importance for teachers to teach learners how to develop critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills. Your study guides go into depth on discussing what is meant by critical thinking skills. So let me just give a quick definition of critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills can be defined as reasonable, reflective thinking that is focused on deciding what to believe or do. So in this case, please, your focus in your discussion here, it will be why is it important for teachers to teach learners how to develop critical thinking skills. In other words, why do learners need to develop critical thinking skills? For you as a teacher, why do you think learners need to develop critical thinking skills? So you give us the advantages of having developed critical thinking skills as a learner. Why should a person, for example, develop critical thinking skills? Critical thinking skills enables people not to be misled by the system or people, but it's important also to critically look at something and make your own decision based on what is in front of you. You are not easily misled when you are capable of thinking critically. It can also be it can enable you to analyze information critically that you are given, so that you are well informed. It makes you to be open-minded. You take into account the totality of situations. You recognize the structure of an argument and the validity of facts and the conclusions. Before you simply just believe something because someone said it, you will actually analyze such information critically, and you also go into any discussion with an open mind. You don't just have a belief system that you believe that this is this and that's all, that's it. You actually take into account the totality of situations and look at the arguments that are made when you are a critical thinker. That's what you need here. And then we have the last part of question 2 here, whereby this question, it will ask you to it's a discussion also, a discussion of 12 marks. A discussion of 12 marks which talks about the characteristics of a person with a low emotional intelligence. You know, we've got people that have got low emotional intelligence and we've got people that have got high emotional intelligence. But in this specific question, I'm only interested in the characteristics of people or a person with a low emotional intelligence. Please do a thorough discussion on the characteristics of a person that has got a low emotional intelligence. For example, it states that in your study guides that a person that has got a low emotional intelligence, they lie a lot. That's one of the reason you can tell. Even with your learners, you can tell that the learner will constantly lie, even when it's not necessary. I don't know whether it's ever necessary to lie, but you have learners who lie constantly. They exaggerate and they minimize their true feelings. Therefore, they do not tell you where they stand and where you stand with them. A person who has a low emotional intelligence acts out their feelings rather than thinking about them. They are insensitive and they are not interested in your feelings, and they often do not have any empathy. They offer little chance of emotional intimacy. They are often pessimistic, and they often believe the world is unfair. These are people who blame everyone for all the problems in the world apart from themselves, even when it's their own fault at times. They frequently feel inadequate and victimized. Like I say, feel that they are never at fault. They often avoid connections with people, and they seek substitute relationships with other things like pets or plants. They jump ship at the first sign of trouble, meaning that they run away when it's trouble. They don't want to sit and handle or solve the problem. They often carry grudges, and they are unforgiving, and they hardly ever admit their own mistakes, and they are often rigid and with no empathy. I think we mentioned empathy here again. Empathy also comes up in that point again. They let things build up, then they blow up and they react strongly to something which is relatively minor. Something that you might think that you just leave it, but then they always react. These are some of the characteristics of people with a low emotional intelligence, and there are actually a lot in your study guide. Please go through them, and you should be able to discuss these points. Okay, that is question 2. Now we go on to question 3. Question 3 is from Unit 3, and Unit 3 is analyzing and designing different types of lessons or learning sessions. Now it's part 2, the practical part of part 2 of this topic of types of lessons and learning sessions. Okay, the first question, it will be on the importance of evaluating presentation of lessons in the teaching learning process. Why should we evaluate our presentations of our lessons before we start teaching? Okay, the purpose of evaluating a lesson involving a result is to assist a teacher to determine the effectiveness of his or her teaching. Is one example there of the answer you could possibly put on this question. It is part of the professional development of a teacher to take responsibility for the quality of teaching. Therefore, the level of professional development is reflected upon by using a form to measure how well all the teaching learning elements are put together. So before you go in the classroom and deliver your lesson, it's your responsibility as a teacher to ensure that the quality of your teaching is put together in a most appropriate way that will yield the best learning outcomes. Of course, you need also to evaluate and reflect on the important dimensions of your lesson. What are the most important things that your lesson should have? So it's important that you evaluate your presentation. That is a question only worth 5 marks. So please just state those important reasons why we need to evaluate our lessons before we embark on teaching. 3.2, it will have cost you 10 marks. This question is on analyzing. You're going to analyze how to create a conductive learning environment. You as a teacher, how do you create a conductive learning environment? A conducive, the word is conducive, excuse me for that. A conducive learning environment. We as teachers, we are supposed to actually have an environment in which learning takes place at its best. So how do we go about creating a conducive learning environment for our classrooms? Our environment impacts unconsciously upon our mood, our curiosity, and our motivation to do something. Therefore, it's important that we create classrooms that actually will enable our learners to learn and be motivated to learn. The environment can therefore make us happy, they can make us excited. So create classrooms that should actually make learners happy, excited, and the classrooms should not create boredomness for the learners. It should not make learners disinterested in the learning process. yes, so everything that you have there, your colorful decorations on your wall, all these things should actually create a conducive learning environment for your learners and for yourself as a teacher also. The room layout and seating arrangement can promote learning as well. So ensure that the layout of your chairs and your desks are in such a way that can promote learning. It's also important that the physical condition of the class should stimulate learning and not bring disruptions for your class. The learning activities, most importantly, should motivate and give feedback on learning efforts and so forth. So this is what you need to do for this specific question, which is worth 10 marks. I'm going to go to question 4, which is from unit 4. Unit 4 is about investigating and applying cooperative methods. The first question is on the relationship between teaching methods and sources of knowledge. Okay, so here please you need to describe any 3 sources of knowledge that a teacher will need in order to embark on teaching so as to have the best outcomes in the teaching and learning process. What are the sources of knowledge that the teacher can use? For example, we've got sources like textbooks and other printed source of knowledge. We have got electronic technologies like video tapes, all these technological aspects. Now we talk about YouTube these days. We have cell phones, we've got laptops, we've got computers and all these things, all this radio and TV, all those electronic so we can use knowledge. The teacher, him or herself, is also a source of knowledge, because a teacher must have a clear level of subject expertise and it is expected to keep abreast of changes in his or her subject area. As a teacher, we know, for example, if you are a teacher, you are a source of knowledge. You have your subject knowledge, and you are able to share this subject knowledge with the people that you are teaching. And then we also have learners and peers as source of knowledge. Of course, peer tutoring, when we have when you have learners who are able to tutor other learners in the classroom, this is also a source of knowledge, because some learners, they tend to understand some of the facts or ways or methods of doing things quite easily compared to other learners, and they can be used as a source of knowledge for your classroom in your teaching. Parents and community members are also used as sources of knowledge, because parents and community members can get involved in the teaching of certain aspects. And sometimes as a teacher, you need to go through your syllabus and understand which part you can use in a parent or a community member. Sometimes parents, they may not have the academic training that you might need, but their life and work experiences are valuable information that you can use to actually help you in your teaching and learning. Okay, and then we come to the last question, which is now about the features of cooperative learning. As we know, our unit 4 is about cooperative methods. Cooperative learning has got its features. These are features like individual accountability, face-to-face interaction, periodic self-assessment of group functioning. All those are some of its features. Please, you must be able to state these features and describe them, how they can help cooperative learning. For example, if we talk about individual accountability as a feature of cooperative learning, each learner is under the feature of individual accountability. We can say each learner is held personally accountable for his or her part and for everyone else's part as well. So if you, for example, you put learners in a group of 5, and for example you say they should come up with an essay on the floods that took place in Namibia in the year 2008, for example, an essay of about 200 words, and then at the end of this essay they should come and present this lesson in class. So if we have five learners, maybe you can say one can do the introduction, the other part talks about the negative effects that the floods had, the other one can talk about the damage that the floods had on the environment. This last learner can talk about the damage that it had on the economy in general, and then we have someone doing the conclusion. So when we talk about individual accountability here, we mean that each and every learner in that group is given a part that he or she is responsible for. So each and every learner should be held personally accountable for his or her part, and overall, at the end of the day, everyone should also be held responsible for everyone's part. If I'm doing introduction, it's my part, and I'm supposed to make sure that the introduction is done well as a learner in the classroom. And of course, my other team members will also ensure that I do my part well. That's what we mean by everyone's else part as well. As an example of how individual accountability can be used. And when you use examples of your own in such a manner in which I used mine, it will actually help me as the marker and the tutor to actually realize that you have understood what you are being asked to do and you are answering the questions. And we go on now to question 5, which is the last question. So there are 5 questions in this. There are 5 questions in this question paper. It's not 3 questions; it's 5 questions. And question 5 is from Unit 5. Unit 5 is discuss and facilitate learning using a variety of methods and learning activities. There are 4 phases of Kolb's experimental learning cycle. We've got the concrete experience, the reflective observation, and the abstract conceptualization, and the active experimentation. So you are required actually to discuss Kolb's experiential learning cycle using these 4 headings. You can talk about the experiential education as an approach in which educators purposefully engage with learners through a variety of experiential methodologies, indirect experience, and focused reflection in order to increase knowledge, develop skills, and clarify values. You can also discuss it as a process of actively engaging learners in an experience where learners make discoveries and experiment with knowledge themselves instead of hearing or reading such knowledge. All these are some of the discussion you can discuss here. This is a question with I've not put the marks there, but in any case, we will conclude that as long as you have answered this Kolb's learning cycles using all these 4 phases, then it's fine. Don't forget to please revise well and try to get as much information as you can before the exams. That is question 5. So in question 5, Unit 5, you are only having 1 question. And then we go to Unit 6. There will be a question 6 from Unit 6. So in total, we are having 6 questions. In our 6 questions, we have a question from Unit 1, which is question 1. We have questions from Unit 2, which will be under the question 2 questions. We have question 3 from Unit 3. We have question 4 from Unit 4, and then we've got question 5. In question 5, which I just finished discussing now about the Kolb's experiential methods or cycle, it's only 1 question from Unit 5 that you need to concentrate on. And then in Unit 6, which is about discuss and apply creative methods, there will also just be 1 question in question 6, which is worth 14 marks. This question talks about simulations, the meaning of simulation method and its benefits. The use of relevant examples here will help you get more marks. So please, in this case, please discuss what is meant by simulations and what are the benefits of the simulation method. Use examples in your answer. It will help you gain more marks. Any one relevant example will actually help you score marks. But please do a discussion. It's a question of 14 marks. So a 1 sentence of the meaning of simulation is not enough. You have to discuss what is meant by simulation and discuss the benefit. Very important. Also, the marks will come from the discussion of the benefits of simulation method. Okay, let me just mention one of the benefits of simulation. It can simulation can promote cognitive, affective, and interpersonal skills that emphasize response accuracy, speed, self-pacing, and convergent questioning abilities. It can also provide immediate feedback on actions and decisions. These are just some of the benefits of simulations. You are free to look more into them, and of course you can make any example of the simulation that can be used in a classroom. This is the end of this contact session for the CTM students, the ones that are doing the course that I mentioned earlier. Just before I say my goodbyes here, let me just emphasize that please try as much as possible to answer the questions. It's not enough to leave some of the questions blank without answering them at all. Try and to attempt each and every questions. You are writing these exams for 2 hours 30 minutes, so I should assume you have enough time to tackle each and every questions. These are questions that are based on your study guides, so do prepare well and try to not lose focus. Try to answer what the question is asking. Do not go out of topic, and try to be as precise as possible in your answers, and look also at your spellings and how neat your work is. At the end of the day, it affects the marking. Goodbye and good luck.